Final installment of the positional rankings. We're talking top 10 relievers today on the Just Baseball Show. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. Before we get into that, though, a couple topics to hit on. Brayan Bello gets an extension with the Red Sox, a nice little pre-arb deal. We're going to discuss that. That comes on the heels of bad news that we talked about with Lucas Giolito. So some good news that the Red Sox can lock up some of the minimal pitching that they have. Unfortunately, paying the same guy more or extending him doesn't give you more pitching for this coming season. So, but we're going to focus on the positive there. And then beyond that, Josh Donaldson retires. Phenomenal career. Famously a very likable and enjoyable guy on the baseball field. But we're going to talk about what he did in terms of, I think when guys limp to the finish line a little bit, it's easy to forget how dominant their peak was and their prime was. And Josh Donaldson's was as good as just about anybody in recent memory. So we'll talk about that. But Jack, first and foremost, how you doing? It's been a fun kind of stretch here as we're getting deep into spring training. But unfortunately, as the last episode kind of highlighted before we had some awesome conversations with Grayson Rodriguez, and we've been getting injuries, man. We're kind of at the injury portion of spring training where guys start to get ramped up a little bit, and as that happens, they go down. So I'm glad to have some good news today on the Bello front, at least.
Yeah, it stinks that we're dealing with all the injuries. I will say we're also hitting the good point of spring training where the early injuries, we're getting more clarity, and chances are it's less doom and gloom than maybe you initially anticipated. So Kyle Bradish, right? He shows up to camp. It's like, oh, Kyle Bradish has an elbow sprain. Is he done? What's the deal? Are the Orioles already, packing it in for 2024? No, we recently got an update that Bradish is throwing without pain. He's up to about 140 feet, and he'll hop on the mound very soon. He's throwing flat grounds. That's great. Vaughn Grissom, likely still not ready for opening day, but Grissom will be back. It seems like maybe a week or two into the season. There are a bunch of guys like that where they show up to camp. They're not 100% right. We got a Verlander update too. He hasn't started throwing yet, but he's got a timetable now. I'm excited that we can put some of those early concerns in the rear view. Having said that, it's never fun when Sonny Gray pulled a hammy and now we got to sit without him for 5 starts. Because anytime we get to watch Sonny Gray, it's a better day. Anytime that we get to watch the Red Sox trot out an adequate starting pitcher, it's a better day. And I'm excited to see Bello. I don't know what's going to happen for the other 4 spots, but you know what? Godspeed to the Boston Red Sox.
Well, and I don't know if we've talked about it on previous episodes. I can tell you we didn't talk about it, Peter and I, last episode, so I don't think it's been discussed, but Shane Baz, a little bit of a setback. Fortunately, for the Rays, young star pitcher who could be so freaking good, it's an oblique. Obliques suck from the sense of it does take a while, especially for hitters. It can be nagging and you want to take your time, but that's way better than a setback of, I wouldn't even call it a setback. I'd really call it a delay in the recovery. Setback almost implies that he had something wrong with his arm. It's not good news, but at least if he's going to get a delay in his recovery and have a little bit of an ailment, that it's not his arm. So that part is good. But unfortunately for the Rays, that is going to delay what is, what we're kind of waiting for, which would be the full flight, really talented young rotation. They're already extremely injured, so they can't get Baz back soon enough. But unfortunately, they're going to have to wait, and you're not going to want to rush him back from an oblique. So now when you look at the rotation, a lot of stock into Taj Bradley, who is still looking pretty good lately. I think the last outing, throwing that split, it looks good. But Zach Littell, Pepio, I think we feel really good about him. Savali's a safe arm. Eflin's good. But, Baz is the guy that can be a difference maker for them, and I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see him.
Which stinks. And, Baz and Casey Mize, I think I was having this conversation with Javier Reyes yesterday. Baz and Casey Mize fall into a similar bucket because they've been out for so long. It's like, does that guy still exist? They went under the knife at the wrong time. The timetable didn't make sense for them to come back at all in 2023, so they have to pivot to the start of 2024, and it feels like they have just been off the grid entirely. Tampa's a different beast than Detroit because Detroit has run out a bunch of guys, and if he's throwing well, he immediately inserts. Glasnow was in this rotation, at the end of last year. Pepio was not. But we were looking at a rotation last year that could have been at its best McClanahan, Glasnow, Springs, Rasmussen, Eflin. We were talking about a guy in Zach Eflin who was 170 innings and a mid-3s ERA that like might have been the sixth best pitcher heading into the 2023 season. And now we're talking about a rotation that was 6 deep with great arms last year, 1.5 deep now. Eflin, I think Savali's the other half. And they're, granted, we love Pepio. We love the idea of what Pepio could do this year. We love the idea of what Taj could do this year. This is a rotation with 1.5 proven arms at the major league level. And it's concerning that you don't get another one of those extremely exciting, low-effort 99 guys on opening day.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have limited proven options, of course, Ba's not proven either, but, you want to have more irons in the fire with high upside young pieces. You figure Pepio, you hope Pepio, Bradley, and Baz all perform, but, you feel better that the more of the high upside guys that you have, at least 2 of them are going to be able to do something for you. But I still think they all can, and Baz is just going to be a little bit of a detour here, but I love what I've seen from Pepio. I know you do too, and Bradley is looking really solid. That splitter will be a nightmare tunneling-wise off of his, riding fastball. So they've got it. They'll be okay for now, but Baz could be that jolt that they really need. But again, that jolt might be coming a little bit later. Red Sox fans needed a jolt, and I don't know if this is going to be enough to make them happy just yet. I know it's been a frustrating time for them, but I will say this is a team, an organization that definitely needs to solidify pitching. We know that Breslow and now Kyle Bodie being in the fold, like that's been the focus here, right? We know they've got so many talented bats, both at the big league level and then all the way down through the minor leagues. So many talented offensive prospects, but pitching-wise, it's thin. Pavetta's a fine option. Crawford's a fine option. But outside of that, you're hoping Whitlock can stay healthy. The only young and projectable arm that I think you can count on for 150 innings this coming season is Brayan Bello. And, I know Pavetta's going to be able to eat innings, but he's on the other side of 30. We're talking about a building block for the future. It's Bello. And he's coming off a year where I think he showed a lot of good things, but I was surprised that he ended up being the guy that gets this extension. I think on any other team, he's probably, I don't think any team is opposed to extending him, but he's probably lower on the totem pole when it comes to priorities. But with the Red Sox, this is one of the few young pieces they have, and they signed him to a 6-year, $55 million pre-arb extension that will give them another year of control, and then technically 2, because the club option at $21 million. But that's pretty favorable for Bello in his age 31 season. It's an interesting deal, and one that I get it from Bello's perspective. If I'm a pitcher, I'm taking the guaranteed money, especially with all the injuries you see across the game right now. And Bello gets that. He'll hit free agency, presumably at 32 years old. And for the Red Sox, they get two more years of control here of one of their few solid, young, semi-proven, and still projectable arms.
The thing that strikes me about Bello is the Red Sox just paid for durability from a guy that was durable last year, and since he has debuted, has been durable and was durable in the minor leagues before that. Bello is by no stretch of the term nasty. I want to make that abundantly clear. He's a guy that's going to eat a bunch of innings. I have a lot of concerns about sinker changeup guys. Brayan Bello is a sinker changeup guy, and we can get into the arsenal there. The best case scenario for Brayan Bello is 200 innings at a 60% ground ball rate. And he is one of the better young starting pitchers in baseball at inducing ground balls. But he's outside the top 75% in baseball. I think he's 26th percentile in K rate, and he's like in the bottom 15% in hard hit rate. So the ball's coming off of barrels. He's not punching guys out. I think it was like 7.5 punch outs per 9. He's never going to be the filthy frontline guy, which is why he was never in the market for a 9-figure deal. But a mid 8-figure deal across this many years, where they buy out 2 years on the open market, you're buying a guy that you hope is going to flirt with 200 innings every year in the middle of your rotation. I think that can be the guy. The question is, what do those 200 innings look like? Is it a 4.5? Is it a 3.7? I don't see a world where it's a 3.2. The gold standard of sinker guys, ground ball guys, is Logan Webb. Logan Webb is nastier than Bello is. And Webb's going to give him 200 innings, but he's also going to limit hard hit balls like that. I worry about the financial buy-in for a guy that you're hoping is I don't know, better than Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, I think there's the fact that he's 24 years old. The changeup's gross. I agree that the sinker changeup guys are tough because you're just not going to get a lot of whiff. You're not even look at prime Sixto Sanchez, right? It's a perfect example where
for those 11 starts.
Yeah, no, but like in the minors, even though you look at the minor leagues at the upper levels, people will be floored by the lack of swing and miss because everything it's a similar action. Everything's at the bottom of the zone. Hitters feel like they can eliminate the top of the zone. And, he's going to work on buzzing a four-seamer up more. And I think that this is probably Craig Breslow and Kyle Bodie betting on the fact that they can help develop him and maybe turn him more into that low threes guy, mid threes guy. And it's possible. But I think the reason why you feel good about this contract is kind of what you talked about is this guy that's going to get a lot of ground balls in a hitter-friendly ballpark and eat innings for you at the very least. And that's important. I think that's something that, one, they really need. Two, you want to have for the foreseeable future. And, I think the Red Sox, realistically, they see the young core that they have. They probably figure that they can really compete in 2-3 years. And, they want to have Bello for a few years through that window, and they're able to extend him now. So it's a 6-year, $55 million deal with the team option that would, for $21 million, that would bring it up to it would bring it up to $75 million. Yeah. So I guess there's some buyouts and little, things here and there that can make it interesting. But yeah, so it's fascinating because I think it's a no-brainer that they're going to pick that up, assuming that he's pitching anything near what we think he's going to do, at the end of this deal. But the other side of it is this. So this is from The Athletic. This is from Jen McCaffrey, who does a great job covering the Red Sox here. But I thought this quote was interesting. It's not even a quote. This is what she wrote in here. Bello's emergence as a future number one starter working alongside Pedro Martinez in the offseason near his home in the Dominican Republic has given the club their first homegrown starter since the days of John Lester and Clay Buchholz. Given that, signing him to a contract extension was a priority. I know he's super talented. I don't see future number one here. He's also not being paid to be a future number one here. This is still the same amount of money with more years of the Sandy Alcantara deal, which was a couple years ago and that was, again, before Sandy really made that leap. Maybe he could make the leap. Sandy was a sinker and change-up guy, but Sandy's also a freak and elevated the four-seamer, found that, developed the slider. I don't know if I have confidence in Bello being able to do all that, but I do have confidence in Bello getting better. And especially with the people that they have at the helm, in Boston, in the front office, with Breslow, with Bodie. So let's say he gets better. He's a good 3, potentially, and an innings-eating 3. At that contract, that's a no-brainer. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. They wanted to try to show fans, I think, that, hey, we're going to keep some guys, especially the homegrown young pitching, because we haven't had much of it lately. But this kind of tells me that the new, very forward-thinking pitching minds are bullish on Bello. And though you and I may kind of think he's more of a middle rotation arm at best, and maybe they do too, but they feel very confident that he can be that. And, those are two minds that know a lot more about pitching than we do. So I think Red Sox fans should feel good about this contract no matter what.
It's hard to leave Pedro Martinez's house after a winter of pitching with him and be the same as you were last year. I feel like you can just sleep in the guest bedroom and leave better. He is surrounded by the right people, and Kyle Bodie, contentious or not, he clearly knows what he's doing when it comes to pitcher optimization. Is it always the best thing for pitcher health? Not necessarily, because there is an over-reliance. There is a reliance on velocity. I don't want to call it an over-reliance because over-reliance would be saying that it's a bad thing. And at the end of the day, velo is what gets guys to the big leagues. So I'll call it a reliance on velocity and a reliance on max effort. I think the best version of Bello could be that max effort where he's, ticking up to 97, and then he's got this crazy changeup with a bunch of, late dive on it, and it plays just well enough off of the sinker. And the slider has to get better, has to.
Yeah, and he's got to buzz a four-seamer a little bit. And it's the hard thing with these guys who tend to be pronators. They struggle to command the four-seamer, and specifically struggle to rip breaking balls and sliders. But being able to buzz a four-seamer would help a ton. The other thing is, and this was also something that The Athletic noted, was that it's pretty much similar to Hunter Green's 6-year, $53 million extension last spring. Green comes with a little bit more injury history. We'll have to see a lot more upside. Like, do you think that's kind of a fair comparison? I mean, not in terms of fair comparison because it is the similar deal, but in terms of, do you think that's a good value for Bello, considering Green has more upside but more risk, is also, lacking some things with his arsenal as well? And I have a lot more confidence in the Red Sox now being able to get the best out of Bello than the Reds, trying to figure out exactly how to get that third pitch to be a consistent offering for Green, though he's a freak of all freaks.
I can see the similarity and I can see where that came from in that Athletic article. What I will say is the Reds locking up Green early felt more similar to the Marlins locking Sandy up early than it does the Red Sox locking Bello up early because of the market size. You've got a small market team in the Miami Marlins, or at least they operate like a small market team. You got a small market team in the Cincinnati Reds. Those two see a future ace and they try and get in on the ground floor. Here, they may see a future ace, and that's the rhetoric at least surrounding this extension. That's what we heard on ESPN on the Thursday telecast, Red Sox, Braves at JetBlue, whatever. They could see a middle of the rotation arm. The way that I look at it, I'm going to compare it to a catcher, is Keibert Ruiz at Washington. It's a very similar number to the one that Keibert Ruiz got. And Washington, although they have kind of fell out of the limelight in the last couple of years, they've been willing to hand out big money contracts. They gave it to Corbin. They gave it to Strasburg. They can operate like a Boston Red Sox sized team. They have the money to do that. And they saw Keibert Ruiz as a guy that at his best is a top 10 catcher in baseball, but probably not above 8. At his worst is a top 16 catcher in baseball. That's how I think the Red Sox view Bello. At his best, he's a low end 2. At his worst, he's a high end 4.
Yep. I think that's a great comp. And you know what? That safety is valuable too. That's expensive too, right? So and he is a little bit safer, than I think some other pitchers that you might give these kind of deals to. The last thing I'll note on this before we quickly talk about Donaldson and get into these top, relievers in baseball is that I feel like it's one of those situations where, you mentioned the small markets, and I think that's an important point because it doesn't matter in free agency because someone would just outbid you. But if you have a pitcher here and they're leveraged, any rookie or young player is going to be leveraged because the way that our system works here in baseball, where the amount of years of control that teams have over you, they're going to say, hey, we're not going to do more than $55 million. I know you're potential frontline guy, but here's $55 million guaranteed. You'll give up a couple years, on the back end, take it or leave it. Whereas I think with a team like the Red Sox, as you mentioned, though they've been cheaper of late, there's a little bit more, I think, back and forth here where it's like you're capable of doing a little bit more than this. Yes. And I think that does help a bit more with Bello's case, because I do think, to your point, if Bello was playing for the Marlins or the Reds, they probably pull this deal off for a little bit cheaper, and that just kind of comes with the territory of pre-arb deals with big market teams. I still think the Red Sox did pretty well here. They needed to at least solidify some sort of building block in that pitching staff, and they did that here. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on to Josh Donaldson, Mr. Wonderful?
I don't think so. I don't want this to come off as me being negative on Brayan Bello, because I'm very positive about who Brayan Bello is. I just think it's unfair to call him a future frontline starter and the face of the Red Sox rotation moving forward. They need to complement Bello and the security blanket that Bello has with frontline elite guys. If the Red Sox sign Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery and they put him in front of Bello, I feel way better about the Boston Red Sox moving forward.
I'm with you 100%. And the last thing I'll say is I'm looking at the pitch data on his slider. Even at spring training, but the shape looks mostly the same. It hasn't been doing much for him there either.
Yeah.
It's going to be sinker changeup. It's going to be below average whiff numbers. It's going to be elite ground ball numbers, a lot of weak contact, and being able to eat innings. Until that fastball at the four-seamer or that slider makes a big leap, I don't see him being that frontline guy. It doesn't matter. It's still a good contract, but I did want to clarify that too. I agree. And especially to the command. I mean, the four-seam fastball last year, below 60%, no strike rate. So he just really didn't have a lot of confidence buzzing it up there, and it got hit hard because it still ended up kind of morphing with the sinker. And then the slider, 53% strike rate. It's got to be better than that. And even when he did land it for a strike, got hit pretty hard. So that's something you got to work on, but he'll be 25 at the start of the year, and he's got plenty of time there to continue to get better, and Red Sox seem to think he can.
Yep.
Josh Donaldson. He's retired. He's hung it up. And it felt like it was about time. It was a limp to the finish line. He obviously was going to finish out that last deal where he got paid pretty nicely. But he exchanged hands from the Twins and to the Yankees. And then we saw a little bit of a stint with the Brewers, and that infamous Rowdy Tellez story of him kind of coming into the locker room, not really saying anything in the clubhouse. And Rowdy says, hey, like, we introduced ourselves around here. And he said, you know who I am. Well, that's kind of, and that was on foul territory, by the way. They do great stuff over there and a hilarious conversation. But you know what? He's right. You do know who he is because he had a really good career. He won an MVP. He had a near 9-WAR season. He also followed that up. I mean, his peak, man, when you look at the peak which was, I think, really when he emerged in 2013 with Oakland, and then followed that up with another dynamite year in Oakland, and then 3 phenomenal years in Toronto. Mm-hmm. That peak there, if he could have, and there's a lot of guys that you could say this about, but if he could have sustained that for another, I even think 3 years, you might have a Hall case. But he couldn't sustain it. He got up late. He was a late bloomer. And instead, we're talking about Hall of Very Good. But it was a really good career for a guy that, I don't think anybody would have expected this outcome if you checked in 2010 when he was 24 years old, fighting for playing time at the big league level with the Oakland A's.
So Josh Donaldson, during that 5-year peak that you're talking about, this guy was consistently running a K rate right around 18%, which was below league average. It was good. So with a K rate that was better than league average, that 5-year average from 2013 to 2017, this guy would hit 280 with a 380 OBP, a 900 OPS, and then he would sprinkle in 32 doubles, 33 homers, 98 driven in. Those were his averages across that 5-year stretch. 900 OPS, getting 30 and 100. He was one of the better power hitting run producers that we had in baseball. The duo of him and Jose Bautista created some excellent memories for baseball fans, regardless of where you lived in your formative years. If you are my age, if you are Arm's age, like, we're both 26 years old. We were watching Josh Donaldson do that when we were freshmen and sophomores in high school, and we're like, this guy's sick. You were playing third base. You probably wanted to be like Josh Donaldson.
I tried the swing in the cage a couple of times.
With the huge leg kick, and you just pissed.
I couldn't sync it up. It didn't work. I tried it from the right side. I just couldn't do it. And from the left side, forget it. It had to be as simple as possible.
Can't do it.
I tried the barrel tip and the leg kick. I couldn't do it. But no, I anyone who played third, I latched onto, and once I kind of saw the way he carried himself.
Then you opt out of the Donaldson experience. Yeah,
pivoted over to Arenado, but I was always an appreciator of the bringer of rain. And you look at the defense too. It was up and down, but there were stretches where it was really good, especially in that MVP season. That 5-year stretch is what I really want to key in on here, though. You mentioned the slashing line. You mentioned the fact that he walked, or struck out only 18% of the time, walked at a near 13% clip. 5 years here, a 33.6 F4. That is an insane 5-year stretch. Insane. And again, like, if he was able to, and that's a big if, obviously, but you duplicate that for 5 more years, and you're looking at, that's enough WAR to get you in the Hall of Fame. That's 67.2 WAR. Like, that's crazy. And then you could just trickle in, whatever he got at the end of the year. He did have that one little fever dream year with the Braves where he put up a 5-1 season. And then, he was actually decent for one more year with Minnesota back in 21 when he hit 26 home runs and put up a 3 WAR. He was really competitive and decent up until, I'd say, the back half of 22, and then, whatever you got, last year. But it really was a phenomenal career that if he got up a little bit earlier, we might have a different conversation here. But phenomenal player, phenomenal career, and polarizing guy. I wouldn't even say polarizing. I think most people just didn't like the way he carried himself. But you know what? You don't have to have dinner with everybody to appreciate their greatness on the field, and it was a phenomenal career. So happy retirement to Josh Donaldson, and congratulations on all the success, because again, I think he exceeded anybody's wildest expectations of him, given, and what was he?
He was a catcher. 48th overall pick as a catcher out of Auburn.
Yeah. And started to, I think, kind of flame out. Like, people were not really sure what it was going to look like. So it's cool to see it, all come together and turn into a nice career.
One more thing real quick. Yeah, one more thing real quick. I like the Jaws score on Baseball Reference for the 7-year peak. And I think Donaldson is a great example of the 7-year peak was awesome. The rest of his career, not so much. I was actually just having a conversation about Michael Young this morning. A great trivia question thrown my way. There are 8 guys since 1965, and I won't have you play right now, but if you want to play in the YouTube comments, go ahead. 8 guys since 1965 to have 5 or more seasons of 200 hits. And Michael Young is one of them. And I was like, wow, Michael Young, it was 5 straight seasons of 200 hits or more. And it's like, that guy's 5-year peak was awesome. But aside from that, not so much. Donaldson, he was solid outside of his 5-year peak, but that 5-year peak was amazing. You look at Jaws' score, you look at a 7-year peak WAR. Josh Donaldson, his 7-year peak produced 41.7 WAR. The average 7-year peak for a Hall of Fame third baseman is 43.3. So he's within 2 WAR of the average Hall of Fame third baseman. Problem is, you look over the scope of the career, the average WAR for a Hall of Fame third baseman is like 69-70. His is 47. So he's more than 20 wins lower than the average Hall of Famer. But in that peak, in that 7-year peak, he's right on par with a Hall of Fame third baseman.
And that's Baseball Reference WAR, which is also, what's used in the Jaws. So, which, again, you look at both, and usually they're both going to be in a certain tier there. And that makes sense. I mean, so Baseball Reference likes him even more when you look at the WAR perspective. And it's a good point. And again, just gets up a little bit late, runs out of gas with some injuries in the back end, and unfortunately comes